Kim Kardashian made big news when she passed the baby bar. And she's been trying to pass the bar exam, studying for it. And I would say it's a very controversial topic. Would you be happy if she passed? Would you be upset? I think the idea is that people don't think she's smart, and there to prove them wrong. That she's smart enough to pass the bar exam. And then I think there's the other idea that, you know, the bar exam is something reserved for intellectuals, and she's not an intellectual. She doesn't deserve it, if you will. I think we all have our background, right? I grew up being one of the nerds. Nerds are not cool kids. Nerds may become quote unquote successful later in life, but they're definitely not cool. And intelligence was the preserve of the nerd. Now I know there's definitely some jocks in my schools growing up who were very, very smart. In fact, there's a girl who was very smart, top of our class, and she dumbed herself down for high school. Just made herself not take the honors classes because apparently the jocks didn't like that. And we all knew she was smart. So there's no doubt about that pretty people can be smart. But I think when you think about super smart people, then there's sort of this question. Can someone be super smart and also super pretty? And I think that's a harder thing. Just because super smart people are just, there's less of them, and super pretty people are also, there's just less of them. And it's just that the two intersecting would be harder to find, rarer. I don't see why it can't exist. But personally, I don't think Kim Kardashian is that smart, realistically. And here's the thing. There's been debates over whether the bar exam is appropriate, this or that. In the context of Kim Kardashian, they ask all these esoteric things. But many people pass the bar exam. It's actually not that difficult. I'd say that all depends on what you define as smart, right? So I would think medical school is harder to get into than to get into law school. I mean, it is harder to get into than law school. But I would say that realistically, not all doctors are smart either. So is it important to be smart? Do people feel the need to prove themselves? My friend made this interesting comment that he really didn't like hanging out with all these smart people who feel the need to, outsmart other people, talk about all these esoteric topics, use big words, be quote unquote all knowing. I say that's funny because that's actually not my experience with very intelligent people. In fact, the smartest people I know wouldn't say they're smart. They don't show off. They don't talk about how smart they are. If you ask them, they actually say, I don't know. They'd be the first to say, I don't know. One guy I know is super smart. I asked him about something about math. So I have a friend who studies math, did, a PhD, postdoc, probably somewhat of a professor, etc. So she's pretty good, pretty smart, I would say. And I think that's very interesting is she studies a field of math that's very, I would say, not commonly well known. And so we are chatting as friends, and basically what happened was she said that my friend asked, "So what do you do?" And she said, "Yeah, if I explain it to you, you wouldn't understand anyways." And he was offended by that. But I made a comment to my super smart friend who studies math, but a different field. Said, "Yeah, I probably wouldn't understand either. Cause what? Cause math is so broad. There's so many, fields in math. I don't know all of it." He had absolutely no issue saying, I don't know. One of the attendings I had in residency, probably one of the smartest doctors I know, he made a comment that there's so much he doesn't know. I'll say that's true smart people. not these fake smart people who are trying to show off. If you're truly smart, you know it. You don't need to talk about it, right? So, what's the difference? How does it come to play with the whole idea of celebrities trying to read books, be smart, act smart? Well, there's people who are smart and happen to be a celebrity. That's obvious. There's people who are celebrities who aren't smart, just like everybody else. Some of them like books, enjoy literature. Some of them get it, and some of them don't get it. But I'd say that's the same with any field. If you think as intelligence as just another field of our lives, just another aspect of us, shall we say, in the same way that there's people who are good at different things in life. You take a baseball player. I would say he's pretty good at baseball. The motions needed to do baseball. Can he play golf? Can he play basketball? Well, I mean, he's athletic, but those are different skills. Sometimes people are good at it, and sometimes people are not. Does it mean that they're not a good athlete? No. It just means that they're different. When we talk about smart, I think most of us relate to the term the same way we did as kids. Book smart, right? Is Kim Kardashian book smart? I don't think she is. That's why she's having such a hard time with the bar exam. If she can memorize stuff, then it should be easy. Not a hard test. Just memorize some stuff. Thinking wise, again, there's not much thinking involved. And there's rarely tests in America that really require you to think well, which makes sense because most Americans, even those who are well educated, have multiple degrees, just don't know how to think. I mean, most people around the world, I would say. Thinking really is a skill that's, I would say, lost today. But why is this such a big deal that Kim Kardashian is trying to take the bar exam? I think this is the idea. It's because we have this idea, first of all, is or is she not smart because she's famous, right? Which really don't have much to do with each other. You could be famous and smart, famous and not smart, pretty and smart, pretty and not smart. They really have no relationship. If you define smart as in intelligent, knowing how to think. Memory is a different thing though, because it has to be trained, I would say. So some people train their memory much more. That's where education comes in. So it's harder to tell when an older person has dementia if they're well educated, because they could compensate in many ways that make it hard for you to realize. They can't figure out what word to say. They figure out other ways to say it. If you have big vocabulary, there's more words to choose from. But if you don't, then I guess it's harder for you. So that's why on the mini mental stat exam, we use to sort of diagnose and screen people. They look at your education level to see what score you should have. But I say the bigger thing is, should the bar exam be accessible to everybody? That's a bigger question. And that's a bigger debate. And that's a question I feel like, the world is trying to say that most things should be accessible for most people, right? People should, given their limitations on their education, socioeconomic status, everybody should be able to achieve everything if they try hard enough. And I find that's interesting because that applies in many, many fields, except I would say maybe doctors. Why don't you just give them a buy? They were poor. They didn't have much education. It's okay. But I guess when it comes to your health, people suddenly change your mind. Why do you need to have smart doctors? I thought we said it all doesn't matter. We need to give people opportunities. We should give this guy the opportunity to be a doctor, even though he never passed the board exams, even though he didn't score high on his MCAT, even though, he can't pass the licensing test. And nobody's saying that. I think that's the thing. I feel being good at your job, being proficient, intelligent, skilled, it still matters today. It does matter when it matters to you, right? So it doesn't matter if it affects somebody else. When it matters to you, when it's some surgeon operating on your brain, on your hand, which you need to use every single day, you like them to be smart, to have the best education possible. You don't care that he had issues in his childhood, an abusive dad, a non existent mother. And that's why, he didn't study that hard. You could care less. You want him to be the best at his job. I feel that's the thing with technical proficiency. I don't know that nerds were ever cool. I think Silicon Valley, the show and all that stuff, didn't make nerds cool. I think the big question is, are nerds cool? I'd say, in terms of importance, they definitely should be. You need these super smart people. They're the ones who are going to advance us. They're the ones who figure out how to make satellites work. I mean, think about it. You have this thing going up the air that communicates with our cell phone. Isn't that crazy? It's so precise. A little deviation, little turn will make everything fall apart. How do they manage to do this? Think about missiles and all that stuff. So you shoot a missile to catch another missile. Isn't that just crazy how it works most of the time? I mean, the other side is trying to make it so you can't catch their missile. And yet, you can shoot things to outer space and have it come back and they can still hit it. It's just crazy to me. I think that's the thing. We need super smart people. And so, in a sense, I'm offended that Kim Kardashian thinks she just come in and be super smart. Thinks she could solve all the issues just because she's Kim Kardashian. Where's the credit for smart people? Who's saying that this is their territory? This is cultural appropriation, if you will. Nobody.